Welcome to the Becoming You show, where limits get torched and possibility takes the mic. I'm Leah Rowling, human in permanent beta, neurostrategist, mom to 3 amazing humans, married to 1 legendary soul, and your no fluff permission slip to stop waiting. Every week, we rewire brain patterns, smash hand-me-down mindsets, and dive into the daring, identity-shifting conversations most people dodge. Ready to turn potential into proof? Grab your pen. Your next chapter starts now. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Becoming You show with me, your host, Leah Rowling. I am so glad you chose yourself today. I'm so glad you chose advancing your life in a way that sometimes these conversations can have in your growth and in the life that you want and are efforting to build this year. So welcome. I applaud you. I thank you. Personal development is rare. Not a lot of people in the context of how many billions of people on this planet actually choose to effectively lead and manage their life in the way that personal development asks of us. And so you're here. And so you are rare and you are honored and adored. And I just love you so much for being here. We're going to dive right in today because it's kind of an interesting twist on some of the conversations that I generally bring forward. But it kind of hit me hard as I've been doing a lot of culture work in organizations. We talk a lot about personal growth in general, not just in this conversation, not just in podcasts, but in the billion-dollar book industry around this conversation. But what I don't think we talk nearly enough about is the culture that's doing the shaping of that growth, right? We talk about habits and we talk about mindset and we talk about healing and we talk about doing the work, right? But rarely do we stop long enough to ask who decided what growth is supposed to look like in the first place. Have you ever thought about that question? Who decides? Who gets to decide what growth looks like for you this year, right? Who gets to decide what growth looks like for me this year? And this is the truth that most conversations miss. We don't just grow in private. We don't become, right, in isolation. We become inside a culture. And culture is not neutral. Culture functions like an operating system. It runs quietly in the background, shaping what's possible, what's not, what's rewarded, what's not, and what feels normal, right? Most of us never choose the system that we're running. I want you to really, really, really think about that. We just learned how to operate inside of it. And so today, I really want to just slow this conversation way, way down, right? And this is hard for me because it's the beginning of a new year. There's lots of enthusiasm and excitement and growth and momentum that a new year brings. And although that's true, I really wanted to take a beat to slow it down, not to reject culture. That's not the intent of the conversation. Not to blame culture, but to really see the operating system clearly, right? Because you can't consciously choose who you're becoming if you don't understand what's been running you. So this episode is an invitation to really kind of step back and ask, right? What system have I been operating inside? And who might I be becoming by default instead of by design when I don't even know the culture of growth that I'm operating inside of. And you know I'm all for growth and you know I'm all for these conversations. But as I mentioned at the very beginning, do we spend much time thinking about the container of which these habits and these containers of which these ambitions and excellence and mastery and all of that is marinating in? Okay. So, a couple of things. When I say culture, I don't just mean the environment of social media, the environment of headlines or news or friendships or networks, right? Those absolutely matter. I'm talking more about the culture within, right? The stories, the mindsets that we reward, okay? The behaviors that we praise, the identities that get promoted, and perhaps the ones that get quietly discouraged. Okay. So when we think about culture in this way, culture installs rules. I want you to think if any of these rules apply to the ecosystem, the culture within, right? Success, this is what success looks like. Okay. And everybody has a definition. And almost without question, we assume that everybody's definition of success is the same, and it isn't. What should healing look like? What should leadership look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What does confidence look like, feel like? And if we're not defining these for ourselves, someone else is. And then you're living off of their blueprint for growth, for their own personal development. And I truly believe that the goal, one of them, of our lives is to know ourselves really well. And if we don't know ourselves really well, we will be living someone else's definition of what success looks like, what healing should look like, what leadership should look and feel like, what confidence should look and feel like. We need to know these things for ourselves because ultimately that is defining the culture that then we can begin to grow from. And even most subtly, this is who's allowed to change and how fast. And I saved that one for the end because I do believe that there are rules that apply or that are and have been applied to what change looks like, who's allowed to change, what the criteria of that allowment is, and how quickly it's possible for them. And so it sounds kind of like this. It sounds like if it's hard, right? If whatever it is that you're navigating is hard, then you're doing it wrong. I've heard that just this last month. If you were healed, this wouldn't bother you. I've heard that too from a client of mine whose therapist told her this. If you're successful, you shouldn't struggle. If you're still uncomfortable, you must not be doing enough work. These are some of the few rules, criteria that I've heard literally in the last week, which kind of prompted this podcast. Because those messages, they don't originate from you. They're part of the system that you inherited. And when we don't name that, what happens is we personalize pressure. We treat system friction, right? Like personal failure. And so I want, again, to pause, to slow this down, and to ask what behaviors does your current operating system reward? I want you to kind of let that sit. Does it reward speed? Does it reward stability? Does it reward comfort? Does it reward visibility? Does it reward agreeableness? Does it reward achievement? Does it reward grounded presence? There's no, you guys, there's no right or wrong here. We just have to know what it is because whatever the system rewards, it reinforces. And some of those are great, and others create unnecessary suffering. So, we're talking about culture. The question then here is how culture shapes identity, albeit quietly. Okay? We must know that identity, who we are, how we think, how we feel, doesn't form in a vacuum. Okay? It doesn't form in isolation. It forms in response to the system that it's built inside. So most people think they choose who they are, right? When really they just adapted to the environment that they have been in. You adapted to your family systems. What did they reward? Did they reward education? Did they reward entrepreneurship? Did they reward um, uh, college, doctorate education? Did they reward philanthropy? What did your family reward? Did they reward values and religion and faith or politics? Like, what is it? Work systems, the places that you've worked, they created a culture for you that you either inherently adapted or rejected. Then there's relationship systems, how you were brought up. What was the relationship dynamics between your parents or your caretakers? Or what was that relationship dynamic between your siblings or friends or coaches or teachers? Social systems. We've adapted to all of these. And early on, these systems, I'm just um, labeling them operating systems, right? Because they're the systems that we operated in. They taught us, right? This version of you works here. This version of you gets approval. This version of you keeps things running smoothly. This version of you being good, being pleasing, being nice. That's what got approved for me. Keeping peace, solving problems, being fine when I was anything but. That kept my family dynamics, my relationship dynamics, my work dynamics running smoothly. I'll take it on. I'll do it. I'll do it. So I ultimately optimized for that, even when it stopped fitting, even when it stopped fitting, even when it was creating an incredible disconnection between who I was trying and fighting to be and yet who I needed to be for validation, for approval. And I think this is why people say, I don't know who I am anymore, or I feel so disconnected from myself. It's not because they inherently lost themselves, it's because they outgrew the operating system they were trained to run. They were adored in running. They were validated in running. And so the question here is, which version of you was optimized for approval and which version was never fully installed? And that question explains a lot. It explained a lot as I answered that question for myself. Who was I fighting to be in order to be seen, loved, valued, approved? And what would that version look like if I no longer needed that? I no longer needed that validation, that approval. What if the only validation, the only approval that actually is ever needed is the one of self? And can I say that I value and can validate and approve of myself when I'm actually living based off of a culture that someone created for me? So when we think about becoming who you quote unquote should be versus who you actually are, the basis for this entire podcast, culture is excellent at producing shoulds, right? You should be more confident. You should be good. You should raise your hand before you speak. You should ask permission. You should be over this by now. You should be grateful. You should want more, or you shouldn't want as much, or something else entirely different. Those shoulds aren't moral truths. They're system defaults. And becoming who you should be is exhausting. It's exhausting because it requires constant self-monitoring. But becoming who you actually are requires something incredibly different. Discernment. Discernment is not exhausting. Discernment is freedom. And by discernment, I don't mean rebellion. I don't mean disengagement. I mean discernment, curiosity, wonderment. It's the ability to say, this belief runs really smoothly. It keeps things going here, but it drains me. This pattern once worked, but it's outdated. This identity was adaptive. It was chameleonish. I know that's not a word. I make things up here, right? But it's no longer aligned. And here's the part of the system that we don't get forewarning about. When you stop running from those systems, familial systems, work systems, relational systems, when you stop running those old programs, those old, outdated operating systems, people who benefited from it, AKA the people at work that were fine and dandy with you just taking it on. People in your family, fine and dandy with you just finding away any struggle and challenge that you had in order to keep the peace. People who benefited from that will feel the disruption. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that the system is adjusting. So, this is another interesting question that I asked of myself as I was kind of preparing for this podcast. Who benefits if you keep running the same version of yourself? And I just want you to notice, we don't need to fix it. We just need to be curious. Who benefits? Phew, that's me. Who benefits if you keep running the same version of yourself? I'm guessing it's going to be people that you love. I'm guessing it's going to be family. I'm guessing it's going to be people that you work with. And so when we think about moving into this year and we think about the growth that we want to have this year and the identity that's required for that growth, and when we really think about the culture that we are growing from, We want to choose it consciously. We want to ensure that we're the ones that are choosing the systems. We are the one that are defining what it looks like. What does success look like? What does growth look like for us? What does healing look like for us? What does feeling happy look like? How are we defining it? Who are we? Knowing the answer to that. What we're capable of. Knowing the answer to that. What we want for our life secretly. Because I'm guessing if you were to ask that question, what do you want? There's a couple of different answers that show up. If you had to share, maybe on a podcast like this, or in a book, or with your family, or with your loved ones or your friends, what is it that you want? Does that look different? Does the answer to that question look different? Would you answer that differently than if you were to answer it secretly and no one needed to know? For most people, the answer is yes. There's so much gold in between how you answer any of these questions with an audience versus if it's just a secret that you keep, and just explore why that is. Why that is. When we really begin to do the work of identity and redefining who we are, what we want, why we want it, and to that, you don't have to have a good reason why you want it. You can just want something to want it, by the way. Doesn't have to fit into anybody's paradigm on what success looks like and what fulfilled people do. You can just want what you want. And I want you to know that no one needs to know. Your conscious becoming doesn't happen and doesn't require this big announcement. It happens through really small, consistent system upgrades over time. So, how do we do this? How do we really bring forward the culture that we have been growing in and why maybe that has been limiting? Right? We've done all of the things, but it's still limiting. It's because we never updated the culture where growth lives. So, first, we get to name the narratives that we've inherited, right? Most of us did not choose our beliefs, friends, about success, healing, worth, strength. They were pre-installed. Okay? So you may be running a definition of success that says success equals busyness. Success equals proving something. Success means rest is earned after burnout. So even when things are good, your system stays activated because success feels like pressure, not peace. You get to decide what your definitions of all of these are. And are they still serving the version of you that you're becoming? Second, notice what energizes you, what drains you. Every system gives us feedback. We just don't always listen to it, right? Energy is not mood. Energy is not motivation. Energy is diagnostic information. Energy is so important. It's why it's the very first core theme that we're going to be talking about in the inner lab that starts this month, this year. And I don't want you to miss it. So if you're not in there yet, check the show notes. Join us in the lab this year. It will change your life. But we talk about energy because energy is strategy. It's diagnostic information. Some conversations, right, might stabilize your nervous system. Others might leave you subtly contracted or second guessing or uncertain or in doubt. Some goals might feel clean and expansive, but others might look impressive to somebody else, but leave you exhausted and depleted energetically. We just get to notice this, right? Where have you been ignoring the energetic feedback because something, according to somebody else, should matter more? And then lastly, choose alignment over approval. This is where upgrades actually happen. Choosing alignment over approval doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't look confrontational. It doesn't require explanations. It doesn't require permission. It usually looks like just saying no without over justifying. It usually looks like choosing a pace that feels sustainable with space that might not be as impressive as it quote unquote should. It's letting someone misunderstand you and not correcting the narrative. Approval, because I know this, provides short-term relief. Alignment creates long-term stability, and you deserve that this year. So here's what I want to leave you with. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not confused. If you feel any of those things, it's because you've been running an operating system that was built for an earlier version of you. And the moment you see that clearly, you regain choice. Choice over the narratives that you keep running, choice over the identities that you continue to reinforce, and choice over the pace, pressure, and expectations that you carry forward. Becoming on purpose doesn't mean scrapping everything. It means upgrading what no longer fits. Okay? So next week, we're going to take this conversation into relationships, into support systems, and exploring when support systems turn into soft sabotage and how even love can unintentionally keep us tied to outdated identities. So until then, my friends, pay attention to the systems that you're running, because when you're conscious of it, you get to choose what runs next. Have a beautiful week. I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye. If this episode cracked something open, good. Let it. And then head to leahrollingcoaching.com and grab the tools to rewire the story and reclaim your future. It is yours. And then share this with someone who's still waiting to be chosen, still waiting for permission, and remind them they don't need a breakthrough, that they are the breakthrough. Until next time, my beautiful friends, invest in you and keep becoming.